this particular time and that they would like to have it recorded. So we're doing that. Thank you. This is why I've got colleagues with me to help. So I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to hand over to Honel Farkas from the University of Warwick. He's going to give us our first presentation around project planning and stakeholder mapping. So over to you, Honel.
Thank you very much. Nice to meet you all. Lots of people, no pressure. Can we move on straight away to the first slide? So that person is the male version of me. When I start in a new job, first day in, they introduced me to lots of people whose name I can't recall. And then off you go. This is your project. Start it. Do your magic. So those are my thoughts in the background. So that's why I grabbed this picture. I believe some of you were in a similar situation, or you can put yourselves in a similar situation. So if you start the project, obviously the grant application has been done already. Probably if you are new to that university, you haven't been involved in the grant writing, so you don't know what the project is about. You found out certain details in the job application when you applied for it, but now you landed in a job and there is high expectations that you are going to pick up really quickly. So a couple of tips how to pick up really quickly what you need to know about the project. First of all, it's a really good starting point to get hold of the grant application and read it. Take some notes, and I would suggest actually typing up those because they will come handy later on when you have to write any type of reports, summaries, presentations. It will be really, really handy to have those notes in a written format. So instead of writing it down on a piece of paper, I would suggest type it up. It will be handy. You can also find out details about the project and how to manage the project, how to run the project from the funding agreement. And I highly suggest to talk with the principal investigator who is leading the project. You will find lots of details, and it's really easy to get lost in this really wide range of information. And there are overlaps, there are new ideas. So record everything that you can, type it up. It will be really, really handy. When you talk to the principal investigator, I assume that will be not one single talk, but multiple ones. It is really important to find out who the stakeholders are, because they are already within that university for some time. They know who the stakeholder group would be. Later on, as the project goes on, you will be able to add new stakeholders to this group. I haven't provided a template, but I want to explain actually what I do usually with these stakeholders. I record them in an Excel spreadsheet. I love Excel. So it is really handy because then you can easily, so you have a column for their names, their organization, email address, telephone number, whatever information you have. And you can have different tabs and get the information from the first page across, for example, who you are going to send newsletters to, and then record it. It's really easy when it comes to the newsletter months that, okay, I'm going to send it out, the list is there, copy, paste, job done. Who you are going to approach with a summary report when you want to influence them, who are the ones that you need to network regularly. So depending on what your goal is with this group of stakeholders, on an Excel spreadsheet, it's really easy to manipulate the data to get hold of the exact group that you need. Obviously, you can use mind map and other ways to present them. So, you know, having an Excel spreadsheet where you can go back to the widest group, that's always a good starting point. So, moving on to the third point here, it's obviously you are going to introduce yourself to the project team. It is really good actually to introduce yourself to the monitoring officer, or if it's a company, then to the key people who are going to be in touch with you, find out who you need to send reports to, how regularly, to your local finance team, legal team, who you are going to be in touch with when they have to create the financial report, or if you need any legal advice, it is when you are a new starter or at the beginning of the project, it is really advised to introduce yourself, make yourself visible, that they know where to go to. And you can actually create a visual illustration of your project team if it's a wide team. I managed really big teams with over 40 researchers on it. So for me, it was coming handy because when I was doing regular reports to the funders, I could actually put in those images. Mind map is one of my favorites for using it when, especially when there are multiple work packages, then you can illustrate who is working on what. So you can start a couple of key documents, and I'm going to move on to slide 2 because we are going to get into the documents that I would like to show you. These are kind of the tricks that I like to use. So we decided that it's a practical session. So always get hold of the funding agreement or award letter or collaboration agreement, whatever it is called, where this money was awarded for your university. You need to check about the IP, the publication, what are the deliverables. You will also find information about how frequently you need to report to the funders, whether there are any financial reporting templates that you need to provide to your finance team, and liaise with them how frequently they are going to provide that to you, whether they are going to do the uploads themselves or you have to do it. It depends on universities. So you need to find out these at the beginning of the project. I won't touch base on the project handbook, but it's a really nice one because there is a dedicated session to it. But the milestone and deliverable tracker, if we can quickly go on the third slide, I created a template and I shared this also as an Excel. So this is a completely fake project. Don't even try to make sense to that. But what I like to record, so you can create a really fancy Gantt chart. But what I found more useful is to use an Excel spreadsheet and track. I'm going to explain really quickly. Doesn't need to be Excel, it can be Slack or whatever your favorite platform is. What I track is the milestone or deliverable number, ID number, because this is how the funder can identify. Then a quick description of what it is. This is usually coming from the project plan or whatever Gantt chart was included in the application. If you have multiple projects, I record them in one single Excel spreadsheet. I don't use separate ones. So whatever the name of the project is, then from the PI, you need to find out if you have multiple researchers in your group, who is the person who needs to deliver that particular milestone or deliverable. And you need to find out what that deliverable is. Is it a report? Is it a presentation? Is it a spreadsheet? Is it a test report or just samples? Whatever it is, but you need to understand exactly what that is. What is the deadline? And my trick is that when there is a deadline, I put an Outlook invite for that person and about a week before, so they really start focusing that week on the delivery of that report, let's say. And if it's a report that goes out externally, I also put some time in the PI's diary to look at the report, because we never send out anything that is not reviewed by the PI before it goes out to the funder. So this is the milestone and deliverable tracker that I use and works for me really well. I can genuinely send out reminders, but my trick is really put it in the Outlook calendar, and then they get the notification it's time to start working on that particular one. The other one that I like to use, if we can go quickly on the fourth slide, is a progress report. This is really useful for you to understand where we are with the project, that particular milestone or deliverable or multiple milestones and deliverables with one person, how they are progressing. So you are asking, what have they done in the past 2 weeks? What are they going to do in the next 2 weeks? So I do it bi-weekly, usually setting up again in their calendar. Every Friday, they need to send me this. Actually, I don't like them to send it. I like them to save it in a folder. And then I have for every single second bi-weekly. So I create a folder for every second week, and they save under their name their report. And on Friday, I just check whether the report is there. This is really useful because they can flag any risks that go into your risk register. And if it needs any escalation, because they do believe that this is something that is something that they cannot cope with, then you have already your red flag, and you can get in touch with them, understand a little bit better what they need, what they mean, get in touch with the PI if necessary, and try to find a solution. So I'm just going back quickly to slide 3, whether I covered everything. So we are going to talk about risk register and action log later on. So this progress report that I was showing actually helps you to get some information for your risk register. One more thing I highlight is every quarter or every month, depending on how frequently you want to report, you are going to create a highlight report, a quarterly report, progress report, whatever it's called in your institution or whatever name you give. So these notes that you were creating and this a bi-weekly report helps you actually to have the information for your highlight report. And it's easier to collect all this information, and you are always on track what your team is doing, especially if they are working remotely. So that's me. Thank you very much.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Lionel. That's great. I think that sets us up really nicely for all of the other presentations. A really useful kind of overview of key documents for the start of the project. Super. Thank you. I'm going to save questions for the end because it's a packed session, but if you've got kind of questions bubbling away in your mind, just keep a note of them, because there will certainly be opportunity to share those later on. But now I'm going to ask Sarah Dwyer and Alex Rollinger, my colleagues from the University of York, to talk to us about theory of change and monitoring, evaluation and learning frameworks. Over to you guys.
Okay, thanks very much, Fleur. Sarah, shall I go first, and then I'll hand over to you? Lovely, thanks. Oh, good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Alex Rollinger, and I'm joined by Sarah Dwyer, my colleague here at the Centre for Health Economics at the University of York. We're both based in Che's Global Health team, and we manage 2 large programmes of international health research, the HFACT and the TANSI programmes. And we have about 12 minutes today, I think about 12 minutes scheduled, to talk about theories of change and MEL frameworks and how these tools can really be deployed to aid you in setting up and managing your project. So on to the next slide, please. So firstly, to start, why should we use these tools and how can they actually be helpful? Well, there are a few statements on this slide, but in the interest of time, I'll just summarise by saying that these types of tools can really help your project team to come to a shared agreement about your project's ultimate goals and intended impact. They help you articulate how your project plans to achieve and deliver this impact, and evidence how you are meeting these goals as you progress through your project's life course. On a practical side, funders are also starting to ask for these, so the choice may be out of our hands as we in the future, unfortunately. So next, I'll talk briefly about theories of change, and then I'll pass to Sarah, who's going to talk about MEL frameworks, and she's also going to share some other resources with you for further reading as well. So on to the next slide, please. So what is a theory of change? A theory of change is often presented as a diagram which shows the project's goal, outcomes, objectives, and activities. It contains only really the topmost level of information. Basically, someone should be able to look at your theory of change and understand the overall purpose of your project and the stages that your project team will complete in order to deliver against this purpose as well. The theory of change also invites the project team to consider what assumptions you must make in order to deliver against your project's purpose. So, for example, you may commit to delivering as an activity a short series of training courses for policymakers, which you hope will lead to the objective of increasing their knowledge and confidence in this particular topic, which in turn you hope will result in the outcome of policymakers being more informed and able to make what we might term better decisions. But you are making the assumption that the policymakers will, 1, sign up for your courses anyway, 2, that they will actually learn something from your short courses, and 3, that they will actually have the opportunity to implement their new knowledge into their roles. So there's a lot of external factors there that you're reliant upon in order to actually deliver your ultimate goal. These assumptions do actually have a dual purpose because they're a good starting point as well for your risk register, and I know we're coming on to that later in the call. So the traditional theory of change methodology states that your goal and your outcomes should not change throughout the life course of your project, because otherwise you risk veering off task and there is the risk of scope creep. But it is anticipated that your objectives and your activities will be adjusted over time as you respond to changing opportunities or policy demands, and those are expected to be adapted as there is a recognition that research is not linear and impact is definitely not linear either. So the finalized theory of change is a really great tool to help explain your project to others. If you're asked to get up in front of an audience that knows nothing about your project, the theory of change can be a really useful diagram to include on one slide that should give people a perfect snapshot of your project. But what's almost more valuable about it is actually the co-design project with all of your project partners and stakeholders. So I'll touch briefly upon that before I hand over to Sarah shortly, but we'll move on to the next slide for an example of a theory of change. So here is an example of what one looks like. This is now an extremely old theory of change for the project which preceded the TANSI programme. But as you can see, we have activities, objectives, outcomes, and goals here. And what you can see, hopefully, through this diagram is that the delivery of each of these layers should lead to the realisation of the next layer. This particular theory of change is designed to be read from left to right, with us moving from the activities further to the right to reach the ultimate and final goal. As we do move closer towards the end goal, the level of control held by us as the project team decreases, and we've become much more reliant upon our assumptions that were made right at the outset and outside influences from other stakeholders or other groups. The activities or deliverables tend to be the only layer of the theory of change for which us as the project team have total control over their delivery. So just moving on to the next slide. So in an ideal world, a theory of change should be designed during the grant development stage so that it can assist the project team in writing the research plan. Now we know in reality, us PRISMs are not necessarily involved in the project at the grant development stage. We might not be there to help facilitate the design of a theory of change before the grant has been awarded. So we have to be adaptable. Some key points though that from past experience. Theory of change cannot, and it really shouldn't be, designed by only 1 or 2 people. It should reflect the end result of a series of iterative discussions with the entire project team and key stakeholders so that everybody involved has bought into the final project goal, outcome, objectives, and activities. In order to do that, in order to gather this kind of information, you may want to hold a couple of 1 to 2 hour interactive sessions, the dreaded sticky note exercise, in order to gather this information and to help you build your theory of change, and also to kind of work out disagreements or misunderstandings about the end goal and the ultimate purpose of the project that might exist amongst the project team. We may not all actually be singing from the same hymn book right at the start. So in the past, I have found it helpful to focus these workshops upon what is the current state of the world and what is the future going to look like? In other words, how should the current state have changed after our project has concluded? And then you can have further discussion about how you're actually going to get from the current state through to the future state. What is the impact pathway that you're going to take in order to get from one point to the next? And so asking the type of questions that are here on this slide can help you start to build up your activities, objectives, outcomes, and goals. Just move on 1, please. So in my experience, project teams, they can quite easily formulate their actions and deliverables and their end goal, but they do sometimes struggle with developing the outcomes and the objectives layers. And this is particularly because the difference between these two layers is much more nuanced than perhaps with the others. And as such, your project team might require your assistance to tease out these finer details and to flesh out that overall impact pathway. You might find yourself asking these kind of questions of, okay, and then what happens? Once you've delivered that, then what? How is that activity going to result in that impact? So that was a very, very quick whistle-stop tour of some of the key highlights of theory of change. I'm going to end there and I'm going to pass over to Sarah now, who is going to talk us through MEL frameworks. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex, and thanks, Fleur, for the opportunity. So again, this is very whistle-stop. So I guess key question, what are MEL frameworks? So what it says on the tin is about monitoring, evaluating and learning. It's kind of the next step after the theory of change, and it's a bit more of a functional recording evidence of what the change is and how we're going to get there. So yeah, it is a framework for describing what you want to achieve and how you're going to get there. It originated in the US Army, and then it sort of moved into international development, and it now seems to be more into specifically global health projects, but I know a lot of funders are starting to ask for these. So it can be useful to track progress against the objectives and targets. It can be good for communication. For example, the funders want to know what's happening in the project, and sometimes reading a very detailed narrative report can take time. So this is maybe a quick way for them to measure that. And it's very much about evidence. So evidencing your evaluation of the project, sort of like, how's it going? And in some respects, advocacy or policy change, I guess. Next slide, please. So some of the terminology around these frameworks, we have inputs. So this is what you actually contribute to the activity. The activities and processes. So what are the actions that your team is going to take, or the work that's being performed? The outputs, so the direct results of that contribution. The outcomes, the effect of your work in the short or medium term, and then the impact. So that's kind of like your main goal. So this is the longer term effects of the intervention, and quite often it will be a combination of things, not just one specific task. So next slide, please, Fleur. So just to give you a very basic example, which is taken from an online course provided by Save the Children, you start at the bottom of this table. So, sorry, just to go back to that. So at the top of the table, our goal here would be that less children are subjected to harmful treatment in schools. But you start at the bottom of the table to work out how we're going to get there. So the inputs are, I guess you could call them resources. So that would be your trainers, training materials, training venue, transport, etc. This is around some kind of training intervention to make sure that we get to less harmful treatment. So then the activities that are going to take place are training courses. We're hoping that that's going to reach 50 teachers from 10 different schools. So that's your output. And then the outcome of that is that these teachers would be trained in new methods for disciplining children and influencing their colleagues. And then the impact or the goal would be that less children are subjected to harmful treatment. So next slide, please. This is kind of a typical example of what an MEL framework looks like, or more commonly known as a log frame. And again, you can see you've got the same kind of terms. You've got activities on the left. So this is around increasing, so the goal at the top, you've got this goal to increase the number of grade 5 and 6 primary students who are improving their reading. So again, to go right back down to the bottom, what are the activities that are going to be there? So it's running summer camps. The outputs are that you've got this number of students, aim of 500 students increasing attending the summer camp and completing it. And then the outcome is that they have improved their proficiency. And then the overall goal is this percentage increase of students improving their proficiency. This table also looks at the risks and assumptions, which is something that Alex mentioned about theory of change. So that's quite important. One thing that I think is perhaps missing off here is learning. So you might have an extra column to the right of this, think, what did we learn from this activity? And an important thing to mention here is your indicators and your means of verification. So your indicators are, how are we going to measure this to see what's happening? So for example, to take the example of the 500 grade 5 and 6 students attending the summer camp, well, you would you might take attendance registers, and therefore that's your evidence that of how many people have attended. And that's just the thing that you can actually measure. So that's why your indicators and means of verification are quite important, because it's not just what do we want to deliver and what do we want the end result of that to be, but how are we actually going to measure it? So next slide, please. This is my final one. So there are, hopefully these slides will be shared afterwards. There's quite a few different resources here. There are a lot of resources out there on MEL frameworks. And I'd just like to note that they can be as simple or as complex as you or your funder, whoever needs this information, as you want to make it. It's important that they're reviewed throughout the project. And certainly, I think, you want to be looking at these on a quarterly basis, because it is a way of recording and evidencing what it is that you're doing. To use my own project as an example, we might say we want to know about a particular topic, and we're going to do that by completing 3 papers in this topic. And we will check if they've been, the way that we will check the impact of those is recording how many conferences these papers have been presented at. If there's a policy brief from that has gone to a policymaker and those types of things. So it can get very complex. Another thing that I would like to note as well is that it's very, very hard to evidence impact, which I'm sure lots of people on this call know. And many things might make up that impact as well, not just one line item on one of these frameworks. And also that impact change might come much later than within the timescale of your project. So yeah, that's very whistle-stop tour, but there is a lot of information out there. So yeah, please enjoy the links.
Fabulous. Thank you very much, Alex and Sarah. Really appreciate that. And yes, just to confirm, I will most certainly be sending out a copy of the slides to everyone, so you'll have access to all of those links. This is leading on most beautifully because everyone so far has mentioned risk registers, which takes us on to Theone from the University of Edinburgh, who's going to talk to us about those.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Fleur and PRISMs for inviting me today. I'm Theone Massara, a research project manager at the Flexible Research Centre of the Edinburgh Research Office at the University of Edinburgh. So we are a team of project managers and administrators deployed flexibly in different projects across the University of Edinburgh. And I'm here today to talk a bit about the risk registers. So could we move to the next slide, please? Thank you. So a quick overview of this part of the presentation. We're going to be talking about how to approach a risk register for a project. I'm going to present a template of a risk register that I've been using quite a lot, and also give a few ideas about the benefits that I see in risk registers and any pitfalls to avoid, hopefully. So if we could please go to the next slide. Great, thank you. So how to approach a risk register for a project? I would divide that into phases. One is before the project start. It could be even at the grant writing stage. And the other one is throughout project duration. So before the project start, usually when the project team come together to write a grant, they are thinking about the potential risks to their work plan. They're thinking about what could affect the the execution of the project plan, what could lead to any setbacks, and those they will be characterized as risks. And we will also try to see the priority of these risks, which could be more important than another, and the likelihood of those happening. And last but not least, they would also be thinking about tangible mitigation measures. So that is before the projects start. So it is before we actually have a full picture of the project, the implementation, how things are going. So as soon as the project starts and we have this new reality, we need to be doing quite a few things around the risk register. So first, about the risks that have already been identified, we should be updating the risk register accordingly. But there are also new risks arising. So we should be identifying those, their priority, their likelihood, and also be thinking about tangible mitigation measures. We also do project reporting to the sponsor or funder, as my colleagues mentioned earlier today. So this report should also be including if risks have materialized or not, if mitigation measures were applied or not. So the funder, the sponsor or funder, they also need to be made aware of what happened in terms of the risks. And depending on the risk, the sponsor or funder should also be notified when the risk is actually identified, not just when reporting is happening, but we can talk about those details later on. If we could move to the next slide, please. So this is an example, a template of a risk register, hopefully giving you some idea of how this could look and what it could include. So first of all, we should have a risk name. I'm using a simple example here, like a delay with securing a venue for a next big project meeting. So let's work with this example so that it helps us navigate through this template. Then there should be potentially a risk description. For example, when we've been hearing by the events team that they're quite overbooked with work, and there might be some potential delay in them actually securing the venue that we need for our next big event. The next column in our risk register could be the risk category. So for this particular risk of not securing a venue or this big event, what does it relate to? Does it relate to the operations, to the budget, whatever the different categories are? We could say that it relates mostly to the schedule because it could delay things about our next big event. Then we could provide some information on the risk likelihood from something not really likely to happen to something very likely to happen. Let's say that for the sake of this example, it's likely to happen because our events colleagues have let us know that they are quite busy at the moment, so it might be happening. It could also be useful to have some very quick thought about the analysis, the risk analysis on the potential impact of the project. Is it very low or very high? So we could go by that scale, and in this case, we could say it's a medium impact. Of course, it could impact our plan if our next big event gets delayed by a few days, but at the same time, we might also assess and say that it's not the end of the world for our project. So yeah, medium could do for this example. Another very, very important column would be about the risk mitigation. So what is the mitigation plan that we have in our mind? So one idea could be that we could ask if someone in the project management office and team of the project could step in and help with this thing, or worst case scenario, we could also explore the possibility of hiring an external events management professional to help us here if budget allows that, of course. Another column could be about the risk priority from low to high. So how quickly should we act about that? How important is this for us now? Again, in this case, we could assess that it's a medium thing for us to act on because we still don't know if the events team can step in and help or not. Risk ownership, that's also very important. Who is the team member or members who will be responsible for implementing the mitigation? So that's very important to be there. that should be very clearly communicated. And another category could also be the risk status. Is it something active, something that hasn't started yet, something which is on hold, something which is ongoing, something which has been dealt with and can now be marked as complete? In this case, with this example we've been using, we could say it hasn't really started yet because we haven't been fully and formally alerted by our events team that they now know they cannot do it. So they're awfully busy and they could not do it at this time. Again, your risk register template can be as rich as you want it to be, as detailed as you want it to be. You could add other fields potentially, like the risk trigger. It might be interesting for you to see what triggered that to happen. What was the cause of that? What caused that? The response type, whether that was negative or positive. Again, we can briefly, we will add some detail on that later on. And if you want, you can also be adding something on the mitigation plan timeline. If you could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So benefits of the risk registers. So quite a few. We're naming just a few here. So a risk register in place helps us ensure that all the risks are identified. We know what they are. They are documented in a place which is great. It gives us all the visibility we need to have, and also helps greatly with accountability and reporting to sponsors and funders. And more importantly, they're managed efficiently, so mitigation measures are applied. The risk registers can help us understand what the financial and environmental risks are to our project, and hence help us avoid staff burnout, project staff burnout, because they're overloaded with work, and help us. And they also help us avoid the waste of time and money, which are both precious. Another important aspect is that the risk registers can help us prevent unpleasant situations in projects. So reputation damage in case things do not go well. Data thefts, that's also very important nowadays. So data security is a top thing in projects, and you will always find something around that in risk registers. Complaints, but from people external to the project, but also from people internal to the project and the project team. Any communication issues, again, in the project, but also with people outside of the project. Also, based on what we see in the risk registers, what goes well, what doesn't go that well, this can also help us assess the project partners, the extended project partners, but also any external partners we might be collaborating with. And that's really important and precious intelligence to have, especially for future projects, so that we know who we would like to work with again and who we might not want to work again. And last but not least, it will help us keep us on top of deadlines, which is, number one priority in a project. And yeah, great, thank you. Pitfalls to avoid, again, based on my experience so far, us as project management professionals, we tend sometimes to use too much of project management jargon, which is fair enough. These are all project management tools, but our project teams do not necessarily include people who would have project management experience, knowledge of the terminology of the tools. So we should make sure that what we are creating should be easy to digest by everyone in the project team, not just those who might have project management background. So yes, we need, of course, to be respecting the terminology and the tools and everything, but at the same time, we should make sure that we make that accessible to everyone in the team. So that comes up quite a lot. Another important aspect is how we perceive risks, because we usually tend to think of risks as something which is necessarily negative to the project, something which is necessarily a threat to the project. But sometimes it could also bring some change, which could be something positive to a project. So an opportunity could arise from that. So sometimes in my risk registers, I would add a column about whether I see that risk as a threat or as an opportunity. So that difference in perspective. So yeah, risk is not necessarily bad. It could lead to somewhere nice as well. As we mentioned in previous slides, yes, the sponsor or funder, they need to be informed. Sometimes when the risk is something really big and really important happening, as we said, they even need to be notified at the moment we identify the risk, because we might feel that that brings important change to the work plan, and this needs to be approved formally by the sponsor or funder. But at the same time, the everyday things that will be added on the risk register, but perhaps the sponsor or funder does not really need to have that much detail. For example, if a project team member says they cannot really deliver something they were meant to deliver because of something happening, and another project team member steps in and offers kindly to help there and deliver that, yes, that's something we should document, but not necessarily let funder know about the tiny details, since it doesn't really bring in a huge change. And yeah, the last thing I could say is that these are all example templates, but at the same time, they need to be adapted to each different project and different team. So yeah, they are a guide, but they can slightly differ from one project to another depending on the needs each time. So yeah, not all of the risk registers I'm using or have used in the past will be exactly the same. So yeah, that was me for today. Thank you all, and yeah, good luck to the rest.
Thank you so much, Theone. That's great. Wonderful. Okay, so I am now going to hand over to Claudia, and I'm going to stop sharing because Claudia is going to give us a tour of the spreadsheet that she is going to talk us through today. Honel, you mentioned that you love spreadsheets. I mean, I think surely all of us are like.
So can you see the spreadsheet well?
Yeah, that's grand, Claudia. Off you go.
Okay, so my name is Claudia Matz. I'm a Centre for Doctoral Training Manager at the University of Nottingham. And I started using action trackers about 5 years ago when I was seconded to set up as a team the COVID testing service. And even as a CDT manager, I think it is a really powerful tool that makes your life a lot easier, because I have a lot of little meetings with different groups, and then you write notes, and then you have actions in all kinds of places, and the action tracker helps you to have all your actions in one place. You need to be able to filter it, so you can find which actions are important to the group you will be dealing with next. And it had an added bonus, because for some meetings I don't write minutes anymore. I only take down actions and then send them around. So that has made my life so much easier and happier. So let's look at how to build this. So this is a really practical lesson. I just wanted to say everybody's brain works differently. I give you some suggestions that you could use, but you might want to have it simpler, more complicated, different colors. This is up to you. This is how it works for you and your team. So an action tracker you should be able to filter, and you will have certain columns. And what most action tracker have is one column here. This is just the number of the actions. And if you're a nerd like me, you like to know how many actions you have and how many you have closed. You can, you can do this or not do this. And an action tracker also has several date columns. One when the action was raised, one when it's due, or when it should be reviewed, and the next one, and I don't know if you see it because I see your pictures, is when it's actually closed, which might be later than the due date. So I'm just gonna go down a little bit, and And I think for the action tracker, it's always important to have drop-down menus so you can filter it better. So as a CDT manager, my drop-down menus will be something like our stakeholders. We are currently organizing a spring school in Cardiff for all of our students. So there are a lot of actions, so I need to filter for this. If you're a research manager, you might prefer to use your research strands or name your industry partners. This is whatever works for you. And the next section is the owners. And it really depends. So every action should only have one owner. So it's very clear who should do it. And it depends a bit on your team if you use first names or you know, the full name. It depends how formal or informal you are. The action status that most people use is open. So you've just been given the action, ongoing or closed. As a CDT manager, I have a lot of things I do every month or every quarter. So I've changed my or added actions for myself that are recurring. And I normally use different colors as well. So I know which ones to look at more or less often if you want to. So what is in the description of an action? And this is just some made-up examples. You have an EDI group, and you just have a call for new members to the committee, and you could do in the description actions for all the new members of the committee. Or if you have a research stand, action required of training all new research staff on a fermenter or whatever instrument you have. And what is the action really? So if I go down a bit further, and I've just used the example of the EDI committee because this is something we've recently done. And then all the members need to know the terms of references. People need to, you need to collect profiles for the intranet page, and you need to, for example, ensure, sorry, I don't know why these things always come up, need to ensure that new members have completed unconscious bias training. And what is really good if you have another column that's called notes and updates. So for example, you can write, you've chased people for the intranet page, which we all do, lots of chasing, and X and Y are missing. So you know you need to chase them again. So I just wanted to note something that makes your life so much easier if you automate your drop-down menus. So basically, if you're in a live meeting and you're just taking down the actions, you can automatically just click on this action belongs to the group EPSSC. And you also would have a drop-down menu for the action owner, so you save a bit of time. And in blue, you can see how you can do that on Excel. So I have an example for you, and this is a made-up action tracker of some actions that could be for CDT managers. And as you see, some of the actions I have put in different colors because this is how my brain works. They're recurring. And I now have a meeting with Aisha, and I want to know what actions are against her, and want to let her know that I want an update on the actions. So obviously I filtered out all the closed actions because they're not relevant anymore. And then I can select Aisha and then basically send an email to her and say, look, these are the actions on you, the one about the outputs, they're due next month, please give me an update. So I just like to give you a brief summary on what I think is important. If you're doing action lists, they need to work for you, but they need to work for your team. So show them to them, get buy-in, use the drop-down lists because they save you time, and there should be one owner of the action list. So if you're the owner, only you can close or open actions. Don't let anybody mess with it, but make the action list in such a way that if you're on holiday or you're ill, there could be somebody who takes over it from it. And I've done the mistake that I sometimes didn't write my actions concise enough, and then I couldn't remember what they were. So that can happen as well. There should be one action owner, because if it's two, who is actually following up, and then review the action list yourself. I find that a lot of duplicates creep in, and you want to remove them. And then you need to schedule the reviews with your group, and how often you do it, depends how important it is. So at the moment, I send a lot of emails about the spring school because that's happening soon. And I like to send people an email beforehand, like these are your actions for the meetings, so people are prepared and can actually feedback. And that's from me. Thank you.
Fab, thank you so much, Claudia. Okay, the people that can see my session plan know that I am we're running over schedule, so I'm gonna skip through my last presentation so that we've got a little bit of time for discussion and questions at the end. But for my section, I am just going to share briefly some experience from my current project, Valuing Voices here at York, on developing and using a project handbook, which was something completely new to me in this project. So the idea of handbooks has been quite a hot topic in the research culture space, particularly at York, and we wanted to try one out in our team, particularly because the focus of our project is on encouraging equitable and responsible research practices, and we wanted to use it to see if it could help us to be a more equitable team. So what is a project handbook? It's developed from the idea of lab handbooks. So in physical laboratories, you know, you've got lots of people working there and joining and leaving all the time. You can end up with a kind of working culture that just develops from people observing other people and working it out based on what they're seeing other people do. So if they come in and they see lots of people working really long hours, or not giving fair attribution in their publications, then it perpetuates a negative culture. So the idea of a handbook is a document that sets out the culture that the team would like to have, how the project operates day to day, and what sort of expectations there are on the team. So it can be really useful because you can use it to induct new members to the team. You can use it to encourage good behaviour in the whole team, and it gives you, you know, a way to challenge poor behaviour if you do see it, saying, you know, we've all signed up to this project handbook, and I think, you know, what you're doing is not in line with what we've said that we wanted to do as a team. So what would you put in a handbook? I mean, the answer is pretty much anything you like. The one for us was, I think the context for our team is that we're very diverse. We include academic and quite a lot of professional services staff. So it's a different balance probably to a lot of research projects. We're not all in the same department. We have varying amounts of FTE on the project. We're also trying to be non-hierarchical. All of which is quite difficult to navigate. So the things that we decided to put into our handbook are, we wanted to work together to develop some team values. We wanted a section on how we make decisions in a non-hierarchical team. We wanted to include just practical stuff about how we communicate, you know, meetings, in office days, channels of communications, what are the expectations around that. We're working in partnership with Mahidol University in Thailand, and global equity is a major theme for our project. So we particularly wanted to have a section that tries to address some of the hierarchies that are inherent in international partnerships and try to ensure that we're not perpetuating those. And then we also decided to include roles and responsibilities so that we were clear who's doing what within the project. that's just what we had for our handbook for our project. Others might have different priorities. Some handbooks have like a sort of publication policy about, you know, how you decide who gets named on publications, or how it gets decided who's going to go to conferences, so that it's not just, you know, the most senior academics that get to go to them. So, you know, it can be, you know, as broad or as narrow as you would want it to be. How do you go about writing a handbook? So for me, I think the value of this is in the process. It's about the conversations, much in the way that Alex was saying about the theory of change. It's really valuable if you co-develop it as a team. It's certainly not very equitable if the PI just hands it down like commandments on slabs of stone, and people are much more likely to buy into living by these values and principles if they were part of creating it. So for us, we decided which sections we thought were important for the team. We shared out responsibility for those, so it wasn't all just on one person to write the whole handbook. Each person took a heading and went away and wrote a draft of that, and then they brought them back to the team, and we have regular reflection meetings. So we use those to have discussions about, you know, the content and the draft versions and how we would go about doing those. The team values bit was also quite new to me. I'm sure there's a whole load of different ways that you could go about doing it, but for us, we had some discussions initially as a whole group about kind of what we wanted to get out of the project and the sort of values that we wanted to see. And then we each went away and did like an anonymous form, and people just submitted like 10 ideas for values statements. So it could have been a sentence or a phrase or just one word. And I sort of said, don't overthink it, kind of go with your gut. You know, what do you think is kind of important to the project? And then one person from the team reviewed those responses, like grouped them and where they were kind of common themes, and suggested some statements from those. And then they were shared back with the team. Everyone had an opportunity to give feedback on those, and we arrived at our team values statements. And we did find it was encouraging to find there was quite good agreement across the team about, you know, what we wanted from the project and those sort of common values. How do you use it? I think probably a common theme of all of these tools that we've been talking about is that they're only useful if they're living documents. That's, you know, that it's no good if you just create it and then put it in a drawer and never look at it again, then it was kind of a waste of your time. So our main way of keeping it current is that we revisit it in our quarterly reflection meetings to make sure that it's still relevant. And we have found that we've wanted to update it. So for example, we had a sort of mid-project session for the team back in January, and we were able to use the team values to kind of frame our discussions around how the project was going and how we were interacting with each other, how we were working as a team. And as a result of that session, we decided that actually our decision-making process wasn't really working for us. So we went back and changed that as a result. And another way of potentially using it is if you get new members in the team, you can make it part of their induction. So you can ask them to read the handbook, but also to update it. So that helps keeps it current and gives them some ownership over it as well. And as it happens, we've got some new team members joining our project just next week. So we're going to try that out and see how it goes. We felt it was important for our project to be open about our handbook and share our experiences. So the top link there is a link to our handbook. It's on our website. It's available for anybody to see. And there are lots and lots of other kind of examples and materials out there. But the link that I've got there I thought is particularly helpful. They've got a lot of materials, including kind of examples and sort of pointers for how you might kind of develop your own project handbook. So that was everything from me on project handbooks, and that concludes our lightning presentations. So we're going to move into group discussions. So you're going to be put in